If you've been shown this at night, it wasn't an accident. Carl Jung. Carl Jung observed that the psyche keeps a kind of ledger through the night, and what it shows you is never chosen carelessly. Here is the premise, and I want you to sit with it before we go further. Jung wrote, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." That line comes from volume 10 of his collected works, and he meant it plainly. There is a second presence living in you, older than your habits, quieter than your opinions, and it has been watching you all day even while you thought you were alone. Jung would stop you right here and say, "Do you see it? The figure that visited you last night was not a stranger wandering in from nowhere. It was that other one, the one who knows you, choosing an image and placing it exactly where your waking mind could not avoid it forever." That is the argument. Not a decoration, not a leftover scrap of the day, a deliberate placement. And if something in you just went quiet reading that, you are not the only one. Most people spend years treating the night as static, something to sleep through, while the one true intelligence in the house sends message after message into a room nobody enters. So let me give you 3 lines to carry into the rest of this. I say them in the first person, because they are yours now, not mine. I stop assuming that what visits me at night is random noise. I let myself consider that the image was placed there by a part of me that sees what my daylight mind refuses to look at. And I remember that the whole of me, the seen and the unseen together, is worth listening to. Say it with me. I make the unconscious conscious. And again, slower this time. I make the unconscious conscious. That is the whole direction of what follows tonight. Before we go on, if this way of thinking is new to you, I would love for tomorrow's teaching to find you too. So consider staying close by subscribing. It costs you nothing, and it means the next key does not miss you. And if any part of what I just said landed somewhere true, type the 2 words, "face it," into the comments, not as a performance, just as a small, honest marker that you are here and you are looking. The first key is, the image was not sent to frighten you, it was sent to correct you. Jung's whole clinical method rested on a single working idea, that the dream is compensation, meaning it balances something your waking attitude has tipped too far in one direction. If you have spent the day certain of something, sure of a plan, sure of a person, sure of your own goodness, the psyche at night quietly leans the other way, not out of cruelty, out of balance. Think of a scale in an old shop, the kind with 2 hanging trays. If you load one side all day with certainty, the other side does not stay empty forever. Something has to come down to meet it, and that something arrives while you sleep. Imagine a man convinced he has fully forgiven someone, walking through his days lighter than air about it, telling friends he has moved on completely, and then at night, he dreams the very same person is locked behind a door in his own childhood home, banging to get out. That is not an accident, and it is not a punishment. It is the other one in him saying, "Not finished yet, look again." Or imagine a woman who has just ended a long relationship and tells everyone, including herself, that she feels nothing but relief, and then dreams 3 nights running of searching a house for a wound she cannot find the source of, blood on the floor, but no cut anywhere on her body. That image is not cruelty either. It is the psyche refusing to let the daytime story stand unchallenged. This is why the image so often unsettles more than it explains, because its whole purpose is to unsettle the tilt, not to soothe it. If it soothed the tilt, it would only make you more lopsided. So if you were shown something strange, something that made no sense against the story you tell yourself in daylight, that mismatch is not a glitch to be explained away. That mismatch is the message itself. The gap between what you insist is true and what the image shows you is exactly the size of what still needs balancing. Jung wrote plainly, "I have no theory about dreams," meaning he refused to force every image into one fixed meaning. He trusted the image to correct the specific tilt of the specific dreamer, not a universal tilt, your tilt. So the first thing to release is the demand that the image flatter your daytime story. It was never meant to. It was sent to balance it. And once you stop expecting agreement from the night, you can finally start reading what it is actually trying to level. I stop expecting the night to agree with me. The second key is, the message could not have come to you any other way, because the deeper layer of the psyche does not speak in sentences, it speaks in pictures. Your daytime mind runs on words, arguments, the small script you rehearse in the shower, but the part of you that is oldest and closest to instinct has no vocabulary at all, only image, weather, animal, house, road, water. So when it needs to reach you, it does not write you a letter, it stages a scene, using whatever material your own life has given it, a childhood staircase, a co-worker's face, a coat you owned at 9 years old. None of it is arbitrary, it is the only alphabet available. Imagine sitting across from someone who speaks not one word of your language. You would not recite a paragraph, you would point, you would gesture, you would act the thing out with your hands, until the shape of your meaning crossed the gap. That is exactly the position the unconscious is in every night, showing rather than telling, because telling is simply not a tool it owns. Consider an ordinary evening. A man sits at dinner with his family, says all the right things, nods at all the right moments, and privately feels a small, hollow ache he does not name, even to himself. That night he dreams of the house he grew up in, every room familiar, except one door that was never there before, locked, and behind it his own younger voice calling out something he cannot quite make out. He wakes with no sentence to summarize it, only a feeling that will not leave him through his coffee. A paragraph explaining the ache would have been argued with and filed under a bad day, but a locked door with a voice behind it cannot be dismissed so easily. It simply sits in him. Now picture a woman at her kitchen counter, on an unremarkable Tuesday, going through a life she would tell you she is entirely satisfied with, and that same week she dreams 3 times of the garden she tended as a girl. Every plant gone grey and brittle, not dead, simply untouched, forgotten in plain sight. No voice speaks, nothing screams for her attention. Yet she wakes each morning with a weight she cannot name. Hand her the sentence, "You have stopped tending the parts of yourself that once brought you joy," and she nods politely and moves on. The sentence is too easy to file away, but the grey garden she can still see at lunchtime will not let her go. That is the whole difference between being told a thing and being shown it. A sentence asks for your agreement. An image asks for nothing. It simply sits inside you and waits. This is why a dream so often feels more true than anything said aloud about the same subject, because image bypasses the very defenses that words are built to trigger. You can talk yourself out of a sentence in 4 seconds. You cannot so easily talk yourself out of a feeling already dressed in a body, in a room, in a face you recognize, a garden, a locked door, a voice half heard. None of it argues with you. All of it simply is, and what simply is, has a way of outlasting every clever objection your daytime mind can raise. So when you say, "You were shown something," you are more accurate than you know. It really was shown to you, not told. And that is the only form the message could ever have taken. Given who is doing the speaking, I stop demanding words from the part of me that only knows how to show. The third key is, the exact image chosen was the one your waking self would have refused to face directly. And this is where the shape of the message starts to matter more than its content, because the unconscious does not simply want to inform you, it wants to reach the one spot you have made unreachable. Imagine a composite figure, a highly capable, highly rational man, the kind who prides himself on never being ruled by feeling, who dreams repeatedly of a small animal starving in a locked room somewhere in his own house. He wakes disturbed and dismisses it. An animal, nothing, and yet the dream keeps returning, a little thinner each time. If you sat with this man and asked what part of his life he has starved through sheer discipline, something in him would flinch. That flinch is the whole point. The image was not chosen because it was clever. It was chosen because it was precisely aimed. Jung called the dream a self-portrait, not a disguise, meaning it is not hiding the truth from you in code. It is showing you the truth in the only shape you can currently tolerate looking at. This is worth pausing on, because most people treat a disturbing image as an obstacle to be decoded and dismissed, when it is closer to a mirror turned at an angle you have not yet learned to face straight on. Now think about how precise this aiming actually is. It is not a general reminder that you have blind spots. It is a specific image, built from the specific furniture of your specific life, chosen because a vaguer picture would have let you slide past it. Imagine a woman who spends her days keeping the peace, agreeable at work, agreeable at home, proud of how rarely she raises her voice. And one night, she dreams not of arguing, not of shouting, but of standing calmly in a burning kitchen while everyone around her goes on eating dinner as if nothing were wrong. She wakes and thinks, "Strange dream," and moves on. But notice the precision. It did not show her rage in a form she could recognize and refuse. It showed her a fire she is standing inside of, while pretending it is ordinary weather. That is not decoration. That is aim. The unconscious had access to every image available to a human mind. Houses, oceans, animals, strangers, and out of all of it, it chose the one scene that matched exactly the shape of what she has been calmly, politely, expertly refusing to notice about her own anger. This is what makes dream images so different from a stranger's warning shouted at you on the street. A stranger's warning is general. It does not know you. But this image came from someone who has lived inside you your whole life and knows precisely where the locked door is. So pause here for a moment and pick one real image from your own recent nights, something that lingered longer than it should have, something a little too specific to be nothing, and ask it 3 questions in order. First, what in the image made you recoil the fastest? That recoil is data. It marks the exact location of the blind spot. And it is worth noticing that the recoil often arrives before any interpretation does. The body knows before the mind agrees to look. Second, what would it cost you in daylight to admit the thing the image is pointing toward? Often the cost is pride. Sometimes it is grief you postponed. Sometimes it is a decision you have been avoiding under the cover of being reasonable. And the size of that cost is usually a fair measure of how long the image has been trying to reach you. Third, did the dream accuse you or inform you? There is a difference. An accusation wants you to feel bad. Information wants you to see clearly, and almost every disturbing image, looked at without flinching, turns out to be the second kind wearing the mask of the first. So when you were shown that thing at night, whatever it was, a door, a face, a flood, a room you have not entered in years, the choice of image was not incidental, it was surgical. Aimed at the exact place your daylight mind had sealed shut, and that is precisely why it felt like more than a dream, because in a sense it was. It was the one part of you still willing to tell you the truth, showing you where you have stopped looking. I stopped flinching away from the exact image that was aimed at me. The fourth key is, if the same image keeps returning, that is not repetition for its own sake, that is escalation. Most people notice a recurring dream the way they notice a recurring headache, an annoyance to be endured, rather than an insistence to be answered. But consider what it means for the same figure, the same room, the same threat to return again, across months or years, while everything else in your dream life shifts and changes. That consistency is persistence, not laziness. Imagine a woman who for a decade dreams intermittently of standing at the edge of water she cannot cross, sometimes a river, sometimes a flooded street, sometimes a black lake with no visible shore. The setting changes. The demand does not. Cross or do not cross. And each time she wakes having crossed nothing. Nothing in her outward life explains it. She is regarded as composed. And yet the image will not let go. Now picture a man who dreams 3 times in a year of losing his keys in a house that is not quite his childhood home and not quite his current one. Each time he searches every drawer and pocket and wakes before finding them. On the surface, this looks trivial, but notice what surrounds each occurrence. The first comes the week he quietly decides not to raise a resentment with his brother. The second, the week he accepts a promotion he privately suspects is wrong for him. The third, the week he stops calling an old friend back. 3 different daylight choices, 1 recurring image underneath. The keys are not about keys. They are about something being locked that he keeps agreeing not to open. This is what Jung meant by treating the dream as part of a series, rather than an isolated riddle. No single dream tells you everything, but a series, read together, starts to resemble a request growing louder, not because the unconscious grows impatient the way a person does, but because the unlived thing behind the image has not gone anywhere. It is still waiting exactly where it was left, the way a letter waits unopened on a table, gathering the same dust, until somebody finally reaches for it. So if you have been shown the same door, the same face, the same warning more than once, do not treat the repetition as proof the dream is meaningless. Treat it as proof of the opposite. Something has not yet been addressed, and the same message will keep arriving, dressed a little differently, until it is finally received rather than merely witnessed. I stop mistaking a repeated image for background noise. Right here, before the next key, I want to say one thing simply. If this way of taking your own night seriously matters to you, stay close and subscribe so tomorrow's teaching actually reaches you. That is the whole ask, nothing more. The fifth key is the deepest one, so let it unfold slowly, in pieces, the way it has to, because this is the key that asks the most patience of you and gives back the most in return. First, consider the question of timing. Why this image? Why this particular night and not another? Jung was careful never to treat dreams as prophecy. He treated them as anticipation, a subtle but crucial difference. Prophecy claims to know a fixed future. Anticipation simply means the unconscious, working faster and with a wider view than the ego, sometimes senses the direction a situation is already leaning before the daylight mind has assembled the evidence consciously. So when an image arrives on a specific night, ask honestly what was stirring in you that day. A conversation half finished, a decision quietly made and not yet admitted, a small dread you talked yourself out of noticing. Imagine a father who has quietly known for weeks that a promotion will require his family to move across the country. He has not said the word out loud yet, not to his wife, not to his son. On Monday he signs a form at work and says nothing at dinner. On Tuesday his son asks about next year's school and he changes the subject. By Wednesday he dreams he is walking through a crowded fair holding his son's hand, and somewhere between one stall and the next, the hand is simply gone. He wakes with his heart going hard in the dark. That dream arrived on the exact night the gap between what he knew and what he had spoken had grown as wide as it was going to grow before something had to give. The timing was the message as much as the image was second. Consider context, and this is where most people go wrong fastest. They wake. They remember one fragment, a snake, a house on fire, and reach immediately for a meaning that belongs to nobody in particular, as if the unconscious used the same alphabet for every dreamer alive. Jung rejected this completely. The same image can mean nearly opposite things in two different lives. A house on fire to one dreamer is catastrophe. To another, it is the warmth of overdue change. The image only speaks once you set it beside the actual furniture of your own life, your fears, your unlived hopes. That father's crowd was not borrowed from a book. It was his own family's autumn fair. The one place losing a child's hand would be entirely believable. That is why it was chosen, not because crowds universally mean danger, but because it already wore the exact shape of his private dread. Third, consider why you must resist the dictionary entirely. There are whole industries promising that a falling tooth always means this, that flying always means that, and Jung would have no patience for it. The unconscious is not a committee following a shared script. It draws on your own memories. A wolf to a man raised on a farm carries a different weight than the same wolf to a man who nearly drowned near one. So look instead at your own private storehouse of memory. Ask what that image has always meant specifically to you, not to a book, not to a stranger online. The true answer often arrives quietly, almost embarrassingly simple, once you stop performing the search and start actually remembering. Had that father consulted a dictionary of symbols, he might have read something general about crowds and anxiety, and missed entirely what his own psyche was handing him, that the silence he was keeping from his son already had a cost accruing. Fourth, consider the discipline of watching the series rather than seizing on one dream. You would never build a whole conclusion on one overheard line of a long conversation. And yet this is exactly what people do with a single striking dream. The psyche is patient, in a way the ego rarely is. It returns to the same unresolved matter, from several angles across weeks, that father, if he does not speak, may dream next of a train leaving without him aboard, then of a phone that will not connect. Different pictures, same unfinished sentence. So keep the simplest record, a line or two written the moment you wake, before the day erases it, and read these not as separate incidents but as chapters. The pattern that emerges teaches more honestly than any single vivid image alone. Fifth, consider that the unconscious is not trying to alarm you for its own sake. It is trying to close a gap between what you already quietly know and what you have allowed yourself to say, to feel, to act on in daylight. The image is frightening only because the gap has been left open so long. A small hesitation ignored for one day rarely produces something so vivid. It takes weeks of a truth set aside politely, again and again, for the psyche to reach for something as unmistakable as a vanishing hand in a crowd. So if what you were shown felt disproportionate to your ordinary week, do not conclude the dream exaggerated. Conclude the gap had been quietly widening longer than you noticed. And so the deepest teaching here is not that the image was a message to decode correctly on the first attempt. It is that you have a standing relationship with something in you that is patient, specific, and already paying close attention to your actual life, not the life you perform. It does not need your belief or your fear, only your willingness to look at what it shows you, without flinching, and without racing to a stranger's dictionary for the answer. That father, once he finally sat his son down and said the true thing plainly, did not dream of the fair again. The gap had closed. The message, having been received, had nothing left to say. I stopped searching outside myself for what only my own memory can answer. The sixth key is, most of what you are shown at night will be forgotten by breakfast, and this is not a failure on your part. Jung himself, late in his life, offered a piece of advice almost startling in its gentleness. Gather what context you can, sit with the image honestly for a while, and then, in his words, forget it all. That permission matters as much as any of the deep analysis before it. Because the point was never to become a person who lies awake, decoding every image with grim vigilance. Imagine a man who keeps a notebook by his bed for a month, faithfully writing down every fragment the moment he wakes. A burning field, a stairway that never ends, his late father speaking a single sentence he cannot quite recall by noon. Some mornings he remembers everything in aching detail. Other mornings there is nothing at all, just the faint sense that something visited and left before he could catch its face. He begins to feel he is failing some test, that the mornings of blankness mean the door has shut on him. But this is exactly the misunderstanding worth correcting. The blank mornings are not refusals, they are simply seeds that have not yet needed the light. What the psyche is patient enough to plant once, it is patient enough to plant again. So the man's task was never to seize every single message before it dissolved. His task was only to remain the kind of person a message could still find welcome in. This is the quieter, harder discipline underneath everything else we have covered tonight. Not vigilance, but hospitality. You do not need to catch every image perfectly. You only need to remain someone willing to be shown things at all. Someone who has not sealed the door shut, out of fear or busyness, or the comfortable insistence that nothing down there needs your attention. And here is the part worth carrying longest. The forgetting itself is proof of trust. You would not forget so easily if some quieter part of you did not already believe the message would come again, in whatever shape it still needed to take. So if you were shown something last night that would not leave you alone, and if by tonight half of it has already faded, let that be all right. The unease that remains, however faint, is not a malfunction. It is contact. It is the other one in you, still awake, still paying attention, still willing to speak in the only language it has, and it will speak again, tomorrow night, or the next, in whatever shape the moment requires. I stay willing to be shown, stay willing to remember. Here is the whole picture. The image was compensation, correcting a tilt you could not see from inside it. The image arrived as picture, because picture was the only language available to the part of you that sent it. The image was aimed precisely at the spot your waking mind had sealed shut. The image that returns is not noise, but an insistence, still waiting to be answered. The timing, the context, and the series together read far truer than any single image alone or any borrowed dictionary ever could. And finally, you were never required to catch it all, only to remain someone willing to be shown. All 6 of these were never 6 separate teachings. They were one recognition turning slowly in the light, that you are not alone in there, that another has been watching all along, closer than a stranger, older than your habits, and far more patient with you than you have ever been with yourself. So if you were shown something at night this week, a face, a door, a flood, a room from long ago, let it sit beside you a little longer before you decide it meant nothing. It was not an accident. Say it with me one more time. I make the unconscious conscious. And again, I make the unconscious conscious. And whatever finds you tonight, however strange, however small, let it be met rather than dismissed. Because it was never sent by nobody. It was sent by the one in you who has never once stopped watching.